I mean, I don't even really have to read much of this article in The Economist. And I mean, I pay attention to the kind of articles that come out of The Economist, and my God, is there anyone amongst them that are actually free market economists? Because it's kind of an oxymoron to call yourself an economist and constantly promoting central planning narratives. If you're an economist, doesn't that mean, you have to at least be willing to accept the wide range spectrum of people that are economists? But no, in this modern world, as we see constantly, that's not the case. Headline: what is the best way to redistribute income? What is the best way to redistribute income? That's the question they're asking from The Economist. Redistribution and Policy by H.C. from Washington, D.C. What is the best way to redistribute income? I mean, right away, you can read this article if you want, but right off the top of my head, the answer that comes like a light bulb moment is there is no best way. People that earn an income shouldn't be stolen or plundered or dictated or controlled. Their income should be theirs. So here's the fucking crazy thing is, oh man, central planners, control freaks, sociopaths, those from academia, and that's the kind of people that propagate institutions like The Economist or publications or media personalities that would want to congregate to economist.com. These are people that think they have not only the knowledge but some kind of authority to tell other people how they should be able to redistribute people's income. And do you know how fucked that is? If you went back 100 years, you'd never see this kind of shit without people at least speaking out profusely, because people recognized back in the day at least that, theft, oppression, forced subjugation, the redistribution of income, right? I mean, you're taking, what a fucking word to use anyways, the redistribution of income. It's called stealing from people and giving others. How should we steal from people and, propagate that money that we steal? How should we spend it, right? That's what they're saying. What's the proper way to steal from people and redistribute that wealth that we stole from people? How should we do it? We need answers. What's the best way to do that? How fucked up is that? I mean, in a publication, like I say, called The Economist, I mean, Jesus fucking Christ almighty, man. What the fuck? Economists have two contradictory impulses when analyzing policy. The first is to ignore its effects on the distribution of income or wealth and argue that policymakers should shoot for efficiency and worry about redistribution later. The instinct often serves in discussion of policies like carbon taxes. These increase efficiency by raising the price of pollution, a harmful activity that without intervention comes too cheap for the polluter. But carbon taxes tend to hit the poor people who spend a higher fraction of their income on fuel the hardest. We should introduce the tax anyway, economists say, and redistribute by other means. This first impulse is loosely based on the fundamental welfare theorems, which says that whatever the initial distribution of wealth, trade will lead to an efficient income or outcome. The best way to redistribute is not to interfere with trade, but to divvy up endowments, people's initial wealth. On this view, inequality can be dealt with in isolation after figuring out how best to lubricate markets. I mean, Jesus fucking Christ almighty. The second opposing impulse, which is on display in many DC think tanks, is to examine forensically the distributional consequence of every policy in isolation. This is becoming more common, partly because computing advances have made simulation models which estimate how much a proposal will change the income of each social group easier to run. As a result, few policy analyses omit to mention the distributional benefits or distributional costs of whatever is being proposed. In Britain, new policies come with an equality impact assessment which scrutinize their impact on specific groups. A good example is student debt. Many young Americans feel it is acutely stressful. Few feel it is an acutely stressful burden which holds back their ability to save to, say, buy a house. Yet, when politicians like Hillary Clinton propose measures to reduce student debt, economists are quick to point out that doing so would not, on the whole, help the poor. Graduates earn more than populations at large. Those with the most student debt tend to be law school graduates with lucrative careers ahead of them. Similarly, economists love to point out that higher minimum wages do not benefit the poorest households most because they relate to hourly pay rather than overall household income. Such policies are, economists say, poorly targeted. I mean, I can't even finish reading the rest of this bullshit. If you want, like I say, it's in The Economist, it's a blog. What is the best way to redistribute income? If you want to read through it and you want to, like I say, bring a barf bucket with you, because as you're doing it, you'll be like, if you're anyone that understands the fundamentals of economics, you'd be like, But in reality, like someone like myself, free market, people that enjoy freedom and liberty, our message, our counter narrative to this kind of bullshit is there is no such thing as a good way to redistribute wealth. When someone earns money, you know, that's the thing. Take central planning and governments out of it. If someone makes money and earns an income, no matter how much or how small, how big that is, no matter how rich they get, if they do it because they offer a product or service to others, and no matter how popular that becomes, if they do that honestly, then no, there is no such thing as anybody having any capacity or authority to step in and say, oh, well, you just have too much wealth. We need to redistribute that. That's bullshit. That's central planning. That's communism. That's socialism. That's fascism. That's full-on collectivism. That's the kind of shit that, you know, remember that fucking propaganda you were told when you were raised, when you were brought through the public education indoctrination system here in Canada? Remember how we were told constantly how that is bad, that's terrible. Well, that is the only time that they were being at least slightly honest, but not only because they were pretending to fight against that before, but in reality they've accepted and embraced those premises now because it benefits and suits those that are in power, that are in positions of authority, those who get to have the capacity to redistribute wealth. All of a sudden now, those people that were totally against it in the old days, now that they've reached the epitome of power and have that position to redistribute wealth, now all of a sudden they think, well, maybe it's not so bad after all, right? Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. No truer statement has ever been said. Recognize and realize. It's Canadian Libertarian. I love liberty.